This is Bruce Bochy, and you're listening to the Ranger Report.
The Ranger Report. Yeah, the Ranger Report. If you want the inside scoop, listen to the Ranger Report. Oh, here we go.
This is the Ranger Report podcast. News, insights, predictions, interviews, and information about the Texas Rangers from the major leagues to the minor leagues. And now, here are your hosts, Ben Dieter and CJ Berryman.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Ranger Report podcast. We are thrilled to be joined today by Mark Brown. Mark Brown covers the Orioles for the Fans First Sports Network. Mark, where can they find you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter at Camden Chat, which is the SB Nation blog for the Orioles, of which I am the manager. So if you don't want to hear me podcast, or if you just want to hear more, you can find me there.
That's right. And we are, of course, we talked earlier in the year when the Rangers had a series with them. Both teams were doing really well. But back then, I didn't imagine that the Rangers and Orioles would be playing for the American League Division Series for a chance to play in the ALCS.
No, I certainly couldn't have imagined it either. The Orioles, you know, they hadn't at that point really had sustained success. It was like, well, they've had a couple good months. Can they do it the whole year? And the answer has turned out to be yes. The Orioles actually had a winning month every month of the season, assuming we count March in with April and September in with October, for the first time since, I believe, 1983, which is also the last time the Orioles won the World Series. So I found that pretty impressive once that stat was pointed out, because even the last two Orioles teams to win the American League East, which was 2014 and 1997, did not accomplish that same feat of having a winning record in every month. So for all that it seemed along the way like the Orioles maybe were on the precipice of disaster, they actually warded it off every time they got close, and they were consistently a winner every month of the year.
Well, I don't know if you watched the American League Wild Card Series, but the Rangers, I mean, they just dominated Tampa Bay, which surprised me. I thought it was going to be a 2-0 sweep the other way because the Rangers kind of limped into the playoffs. You know, they led the division 160 days in 2023 and lost it on the last day of the season to the Seattle by losing to the Mariners.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they that last game of the season, the Rangers, it knocked them out of the AL West championship, and they would have been the number 2 seed had they won that game, but they lost 1-0. So it's going to be an interesting series. But I think, you know, the Rangers, of course, last playoff series one was 2011, which of course went all the way to the World Series and then lost in Game 7 to the St. Louis Cardinals. But the last playoff appearance they had was 2016, and they were swept out by the Toronto Blue Jays. So I wasn't sad to see the Blue Jays get knocked out by the Twins, who we were just talking about off the air. They finally got that monkey off their back of winning a playoff series.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, I also don't want to talk about what the Toronto Blue Jays did to my favorite baseball team in the 2016 postseason. So I understand you there. But yeah, you know, it was funny about the Rays, like the Orioles and Rays games in the regular season, like every one of them just felt so crucial. And it just seemed like it was almost like it was inevitable that the Orioles and Rays were going to meet again in the postseason. And then, yeah, I mean, I was watching the wild card games, and it was like, wait a minute, this was the team that we were like afraid of all year. Like they looked like they had nothing left in the tank, honestly. Now, I don't know if that was actually how it was for them. You know, it's easy to watch a couple games and, put your preferred idea on it. And maybe that's not what's actually going on in the clubhouse. But I mean, it seemed like they had nothing left. And I mean, it's understandable because they've had so many injuries that they had to battle through over the course of the season. Yeah. And I feel like the one they suffered pretty late towards the end there, where their infielder, Brandon Lau, I think he broke one of his leg bones or something. It was going to be out for not terribly long, but, you know, since we're near the end, the rest of whatever season and postseason they were going to play, it seemed like that was like the last one. And it was just, they couldn't overcome one more. And that was like the last straw because, you know, they kind of limped to the end a little bit. And like, I mean, they fought down to the end for the AL East, but that was because they had the 13-0 cushion at the beginning of the year, you know, where they started off. And they ended up with, I mean, still, a 17-11 record in September and October, but just it wasn't enough to beat the Orioles. The Orioles were also very good for the whole, really second half of the season.
Yeah, and the Orioles, of course, won 101 games, and the Rangers won 90. I believe Tampa won 99. I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, that's amazing to have a team that win 99 games and not win the division. Just sort of talks to how good of a season Baltimore had.
Yeah, and honestly, I still can't believe it. Of course, I can't quote exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's been said that the Orioles' improvement from 2021 to now is like the greatest over 3-season wins improvement that has ever been pulled off, because the 2021 Orioles went 52 and 110, and now here we are talking about the 101 and 61, 2023 Orioles. So it was a huge ascent, and really, it's rare that teams that improve so much going from like 2021 to 2022, which they did by winning 83 games last year. I heard this in spring training. It was lodged in my brain all year. Basically, it was like 95% of teams that won like more than 20 games going from one year to the next. They won fewer games in year 3. Like they didn't continue building on it. It was a vast majority could not do that. And that was stuck in my brain as soon as I heard that in a spring training game. Like all year, I was like, oh man, I don't know how it's going to happen, but there's no way the Orioles are going to keep improving. And, not only did they win more, they won substantially more. Anybody that bought an over on the, at the sports books or whatever, that was set at 76.5 wins for the Orioles. So the Orioles, pretty much cashed that almost by the middle of August. And then even at the All-Star break, I think the over-under was like 90.5 or something like that. And they cashed that not terribly long after Labor Day. So just nobody, including me, a very dedicated Orioles fan, really believed they were going to do what they've done this year. And they kept on winning. And it's really been something.
Well, you think about it, and here's a stat I was going to give you for the Rangers this year. The Rangers had 33 blown saves in 2023. They're one of the first major league teams to ever make it to the postseason with that many blown saves. They had more blown saves than they had saves. They had 33 blown saves and 30 saves. And the amazing thing about that, you think they won 90 games and they were ahead in the 9th inning in 33 more games. So the Rangers were a much better team than even the 90 and 72 record shows, because again, 33 blown saves is an incredible number.
Yeah, that's really seems, I don't want to say totally fluky, but because of course it's a function of personnel, and you just if the team, if they didn't assemble a good bullpen, that's what it is. But like, you could probably run the exact same relief corps next year, exact same guys, and you wouldn't have the, that 33 blown saves or whatever. Like, that even if you consider, okay, it wasn't a strong bullpen, you wouldn't expect that outcome.
No, like I said, it's just insane. But I mean, obviously, if they win half of those, then the Rangers won 105 games this year instead of 90, and that would have been, So offensively, I'm sure you kept up. The Rangers had an amazing year overall offensively, and then of course defensively, they committed the least errors that they ever have in franchise history. I believe it was 52. And then starting was great, but of course, the Rangers. You talk about injuries. They lost Max Scherzer, who they picked up at the trade deadline. They lost Jacob deGrom early on in the season. John Gray is out right now. So the Rangers are really running on two-fifths of a rotation going into this series with Baltimore. And somehow they're still here in this series with Baltimore.
It's an impressive set of things to persevere through, definitely. And, speaking of facts that were lodged in my brain, like last week I saw the stats guru Sarah Langs posted on Twitter about last year's postseason. And it was something like the team that scored first in last year's postseason was 27-13. And the team that had more home runs was like 25-6 last year. And it was even more like 2 years ago. It was like 27-2 or something in the span of one game, out homering the other team. So hearing that, when I look at the Rangers leading the American League in home runs, that didn't make me feel great. And also, I will tell you about the Orioles. They, for some reason, and I don't really understand why, they are not good in the first inning. Their batters, over the first inning, they hit just 228. with a 301 on base percentage, 386 slugging percentage. So we're talking a 687 OPS. That was their second worst inning of any, 1 through 9 innings in terms of how they perform by OPS. And their worst inning, by the way, is the 9th, where they had a 664 OPS. So it's like, okay, you probably aren't going to score in the first inning, and you're not likely to mount a 9th inning comeback. The Orioles, I believe, although they had a lot of comeback wins over the course of this season, the Orioles came back and won 48 times out of their 101 wins. There was only 2 games where they trailed going into the 9th, where they ended up winning. So that wasn't where. So if to me, it's all the more remarkable. Like they had 48 comeback wins and only 2 were coming back in the 9th. And I believe both of those 9th inning games, they took a lead in the 9th, and then the reliever blew it and made it a tie, and they ended up having to win in extra innings. So there wasn't even like a come back from behind, win in the 9th at all in the year. So it's neither of those make me feel good looking for the postseason, because if you fall behind early, the odds are against you. And statistically, based on how they perform, the Orioles are unlikely to mount a 9th inning comeback. So, we'll see how it plays out over the next 3 to 5 games here.
Yeah, the funny thing to me, and CJ, you can chime in here. CJ Berryman is with us now. The funny thing to me is the Rangers also went till, I think, September before they had a come from behind when they were down in the 9th inning. They hadn't won a game all year. I think September was the first time they won a game when they were down in the 9th inning, right, CJ?
That sounds right. Mark, it sounds that your stat there sounds kind of like the Rangers was 2016 then, where they had the record for most 1-run wins in a season, and it was something outlandish. And so it's kind of one of those stats that you don't want to see, you don't want to hear about. Like, well, it's nice that we were able to win in the clutch, but this is come playoff time. It's just, you never know. It's 100% different. And I tell you, we're happy to get out of Tampa Bay and that dumpster fire of a stadium that they've got over there.
Well, its days are finally numbered, it seems. So,
hopefully. So. We'll see. Yeah, I don't enjoy the Trop either.
That's another crazy stat. The Rangers are 6-0 in the postseason at the Trop.
7-0 now.
7-0. Sorry, 7-0 after that series in the Trop. So that's just crazy to me. In the playoffs, in the playoffs, they've never lost at Tropicana Field in 3 tries.
Well, the Orioles and Rays were basically never good in the same year before this year. One of the other things that was pointed out, the Orioles and Rays had never been 1 and 2 in the AL East before in the entire existence of basically the Rays.
Wow.
They only came along whatever year, the 98. And then this is also the first year the Yankees and Red Sox were 4th and 5th in the modern AL.
Isn't that awesome?
So it is awesome. It was fun. Yeah. I think they had been in the last 2 spots, way back in the day when it was just the AL and it was 8 teams or 10 teams or whatever a couple times. But in division play, this was the first time Yankees and Red Sox were the last 2 spots. So, that was part of the season for the Orioles too. The fact is the Yankees and Red Sox had an off year, so that did give the Orioles an easier path. But they won a lot of games, and they beat the Yankees, they beat the Red Sox, and those teams had their own problems. But I think still they would have been contending for a wild card based on how the Orioles were playing this year.
Definitely a tough division. Definitely a very tough division to play in.
Yes, for sure. So let's look ahead now. We have a first game happens Saturday at 1:00 your time, noon in Texas. So who's starting for Baltimore in that game?
Bradish is what I'm
starting for the Orioles is going to be Kyle Bradish. Yeah, and that was pretty much the no-brainer choice. Although he's not a household name among MLB pitchers in the sense that it went into this year and everybody knew, okay, he's going to be good. And then he lived up to expectations. And it's like, okay, yeah, this guy, one of the top of the rotation pitchers in MLB. But he's done very well. He finished the season with a 2.83 ERA over 30 starts. And that was noteworthy among Orioles history because it's the first time going back to 1992 that an Orioles starting pitcher that threw at least 150 innings had an ERA under 3. And in 92, that was future Hall of Famer Mike Mussina.
I was about to say, yeah.
Yeah. So, that's pretty good company to be in there. I mean, some of that is like, Musina played all of his career in the high offense era or the steroid era, if you want to call it. So you wouldn't have expected, okay, even if he was pretty good, his ERA wasn't under 3, and it wasn't. So to some extent, it's a bit less of an offensive era now, but still, I mean, it was using the Park and League adjusted ERA plus, it was 146 ERA plus, which is really amazing performance for a starting pitcher. And for him, it's not like this year was a sudden fluke, because he was also very good in the second half of last year. So it was really just a continuation of what he had started in the second half of last year. He's now got, 9 months of really good baseball under his belt. And I think that's enough to hope that maybe he will continue. So, he's the number one guy. He got the game 1 start. And presumably if the series goes 5 games, he'll be going again in the 5th game as well.
All right, CJ, talk about who we project is going to start for the Rangers. That's Dane Dunning.
Yeah, Dane Dunning. We Bruce Bochy said last week that Dane Dunning was the MVP for the team, and it's hard to argue against that because he started in the bullpen, and Jacob deGrom goes out. It's a big kick in the junk, and Dane Dunning, first man up, comes in out of the bullpen and picks up. I mean, just like he had been there the whole time, been in the rotation the whole time, and jumped back into the bullpen for a brief period in the middle of the season, and then right back in. And man, he was lights out. He's been lights out since. And I think I only recall one start where you can actually say this season that he had a bad start.
Yeah,
he's super consistent. He doesn't throw super hard. He'll touch 92, probably top out at 92. But mainly around 90, 91. But he mixes his speeds well. His off-speed stuff's good, really good. His changeup and slider, really, really, really good. So he's not a power pitcher, but he definitely throwing low 90s or then topping out at 92. You got to have some good stuff, and you got to be able to locate it. And he's done an excellent job at that. So we're very happy to with what Dane's been able to do. Now, obviously, this is his first postseason experience, as it is a lot of Rangers players. So it'll be interesting to see how he comes out and how the nerves are there that first inning too. It's good to hear that y'all aren't very good in the first inning. So.
No, it's really, the odds are the Orioles will not score in the first inning unless they break the trend from the year. So. It's interesting hearing about Dunning there. It seems like a common trend of any team that kind of exceeds expectations is probably you're going to have guys coming out of nowhere based on the preseason expectations
we had no idea.
To end up being contributors.
We didn't think Evan Carter was going to be up at all this year, and he probably wouldn't have had Adolis Garcia not injured his knee and had to get put on the IL. So it's a little blessing in disguise, I guess you could call that. So yeah, like you said, there's guys that there's always, when you look at the postseason, always guys that you never heard of that end up making an impact that helps push the team over into getting into the postseason. And for that, Dane Dunning, I mean, I don't know where the Rangers are without him. Mitch Garver, another one. I don't know where the Rangers are without him, without his September that he had, his September stretch where he was just killing the ball. And don't know where they'd be really without Evan Carter now. I mean, it's been a strange year, one that Bruce Bochy has said he's never seen before in his managing career. So
yeah, the Rangers were severely bipolar in 2023. They were the best team in baseball for the first 4 months, or not the best team in baseball, but the best team in the American League West by far. And they were one of the worst teams in baseball in late August through late September. And I think they started in August 8-0, and then they lost, I think, 12 of their next 15 or 12 of their next 16, something like that.
18, I think.
It was bad. Yeah, they were
16 out of their last 20.
Yeah.
16 of 20. Yeah.
But anyway, let's talk about game 2. You guys have Rodriguez going.
Yes, Grayson Rodriguez. So if you look at his season-long stats, you might say, okay, he had a 4.35 ERA for the full season. Not too great, but I think that kind of masks that he had a before and after of his 2023. So he ended up getting called up actually during the first series the Orioles played against the Rangers back in April, where they needed him to fill in because Kyle Bradish, now the game 1 starter, got a line drive off the foot in his first start, and that gave a little chaos. And he wasn't good in April and May and ended up getting demoted back to the minors. And Rodriguez basically entered the season as like really a top 10 like prospect in all of MLB, and justifiably so. He had done a lot in the minor leagues to earn that kind of hype, and only didn't get his debut last year because in June he suffered an injury to his lat muscle, and that ended up basically taking him out for a couple of months. And by the time he was really in shape to rehab that, the season was almost over, so they weren't going to rush him just up to the Orioles in September. And he didn't look like that guy in April and May, and they sent him back to the minors. And there were Orioles fans who are like, oh man, here's another Orioles pitching prospect who's a bust and he's just never going to make it. And all of you who believed in him were just stupid for thinking it was going to happen. And he worked on some stuff in AAA, and they called him back up after the All-Star break. And in the second half of the season, he went on to have a 2.58 ERA over 13 starts. And that was with 73 strikeouts over 76 and 2/3 innings, only allowed 3 home runs to 304 batters that he faced after the All-Star break. So whatever he went down and worked on in AAA, it did seem like he came back ready to look like the top 10 prospect in the game that he was thought to be before the season. And that was
he a ground ball pitcher, like a sinker type pitcher, or
he's really more of like a strikeout guy and then gets some pop-ups rather than giving up home runs when it's going well for him. So I mean, I don't know how that'll play out here in October in the postseason. Actually, there were some folks on Camden Chat on my website that wanted the Orioles to have John Means start Game 2 of the series. Means, of course, threw a no-hitter in Seattle 2 years ago for the Orioles, but he has not been a part of the team, really the resurgence dating back to last year, because last year he only started 2 games and then he blew out his ACL and needed Tommy John surgery. So, that took him out until this year. And when he was starting the rehab for the Tommy John, he injured one of his back muscles, and that knocked him back a couple more months. So he didn't make it back to MLB until September. He made 4 regular season starts after coming back from the Tommy John here. But still, some people wanted him to start in Camden Yards because he is a homer-prone pitcher, and as a lefty, facing the righties, his weak side, folks thought maybe he would have more of an advantage pitching to the new left field wall dimensions at Camden Yards. I think that would have been overthinking galaxy brain kind of stuff, because really just have your 2 best starting pitchers start Game 1 and 2, and you don't need to overthink that, but there were people that were trying to talk themselves into Means. I don't know if he'll end up being a Game 3 starter, Game 4. I honestly don't know how the Orioles are going to evaluate Means. He did at least have one deep start. I think he went 7 1/3 in one of his 4 starts. So he did build up the pitch count, but that was against the Guardians, not a powerhouse offense on
they swept
the Rangers, which doesn't mean, obviously they're still major leaguers, but their offense overall was not very good. So I don't know how the Orioles are going to look at where they want Means to face the Rangers, but we'll see how it shakes out.
You guys will be facing Jordan Montgomery on Sunday, who obviously had his best start of the season in the playoffs. Pitched over 7 shutout innings against Tampa Bay. On the season, he had a 2.79 ERA. He started 11 games with the Rangers. This is with the Rangers. He had a 2.79 ERA. He struck out 58 in 67 innings. Not really a strikeout guy. He's a ground ball guy. He does such a really good job. And that last start, if he builds off that, it's going to be hard for the Orioles to get a lot of hits off of him, because he was really, really good in that last start. Just shut down Tampa Bay. Of course, he made that diving catch over on a bunt by first base. It was really incredible in that game. So Montgomery has been the only thing, I think, that really, well, not the only thing, but the pitcher that has taken over as the ace with no DeGrom and no Scherzer in the lineup. He seems to be the one that's really picked it up. And he was kind of a quiet signing when the Rangers traded for him. No one was really excited about Jordan Montgomery coming over. But CJ, he's turned out to be our best pitcher in the month of September.
Yeah, thus far, and with Uvalde's struggles coming off the IL, but Uvalde, he followed that up with an outstanding start, Game 2, as you know. And if we get that Jordan Montgomery, who he loves, they had 9 right-handers. The entire batting lineup for the Rays was all right-handers against Montgomery. and he doesn't mind that at all. He attacks the outside corner with a 4-seam fastball, a 2-seam fastball, and his changeup is just really, really good. And then I like what he did in the going through the order for the third time. He started throwing breaking balls. He started opening up with curveballs. Just changed his changed his rhythm up, and was getting ahead on breaking balls and then going back away with fastballs and changeup. So he's done excellent. And yeah, like you said, it was not a huge as a Max Scherzer trade, nothing like that. It wasn't that high profile, but he has definitely been the Rangers' best pitcher since he's come over from St. Louis.
Yeah, and I don't expect to see Scherzer back in this series. There's a small chance he could, but I don't expect to see Scherzer. If the Rangers wind up advancing past this series, it's a possibility, but I still don't know if you would see him in that series. But I really think this game is going to come, or this series is going to come down to bullpens, which is where the Rangers have been their worst by far this year. Their bullpen was just, fans have pretty much described it as a dumpster fire for most of the season. But the thing is, they've been good of late. They did great in the playoffs. So between Baltimore and the Rangers, I'm pretty sure you guys have the bullpen edge, Mark.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing. I don't know how deep you guys are in Orioles injury news, but basically a big part of why the Orioles bullpen was so great this year was Felix Bautista, the all-star closer. And he ended up suffering a partial tear to his ulnar collateral ligament and is going to need Tommy John surgery. He suffered that when I think is like August 28th or something like that. So pretty close to the end of the season. They tried to have him do some rehab through September to see if maybe he'd be able to pitch through the tear and help in the postseason, but that turned out to not be the case. So they announced he's going to need Tommy John surgery. He's out till spring training 2025. So, that's a tough guy to lose. The Orioles, they did without him. Their ERA without Bautista in September in the last couple of days of August was actually identical for their relievers versus before Bautista was hurt, as it turned out. But still, it's a tough blow. I think particularly Bautista as a huge strikeout guy. Like, he had 110 strikeouts in 61 innings this year. For much of the season, he was striking out literally more than 50% of the batters he faced. He ended up being slightly below that, I think 47% when it all finished. So, that's, think about that guy in the playoffs, right? If you can have a guy who's going to come in for an inning and he's probably going to strike out 2 guys, that gets you a long way towards an easy 9th inning,
two-thirds of an inning.
So he's out of the mix, and that's a tough blow. The Orioles did still have plenty of other good relievers. Nobody as good as Bautista. I don't know. They might end up kind of playing matchups rather than having a specific closer. It's hard to say. They did have another all-star reliever in Yennier Cano, who really came out of nowhere. And he had like a under 1 ERA for most of the first half of the season, struggled a bit in June and July, and then bounced back in August and September. Finished the year with a 2.11 ERA. He's more of a ground ball pitcher. So that's like, okay, if there's a man on first, pretty good chance he's going to get a ground ball, maybe a double play. They picked up reliever Danny Colomé from the Twins for cash at the end of spring training. He ended up being a key part of the bullpen, a 2.81 ERA in 61 games. And so that's maybe your two top guys. Cionel Perez, another lefty, along with Colomé, finished the year with a 3.54 ERA. That was much like Rodriguez, a very bad first half, and he rebounded a lot in the second half. And I think the 2 key guys in the bullpen, if you're starting to talk about, who's going to pitch the 7th or even the 6th, it's probably going to end up being DL Hall, who was another pitching prospect for the Orioles. He was a starter prospect. They kind of shifted him into the bullpen this year. He is a hard-throwing lefty, and maybe potentially could be the strikeout heavy guy that they lost when Bautista got injured. And also, it looks like in the bullpen, it's going to be Tyler Wells, who actually started the year in the Orioles rotation. And through June, I believe, was the MLB leader in WHIP, walks plus hits per innings pitched. And then he was very bad in like 4 July starts as he was crossing past a career high in innings pitched, because he'd never really crossed 100 innings before in his pro career. So it seemed like he was worn down. The Orioles sent him to the minors, ended up converting him to the bullpen. He came back in September, had 6 scoreless innings over his last 4 games, something like that. So I feel like Hall and Wells stepping up is maybe going to be a key part of the bullpen rather than like necessarily Cano or Colomb in the 8th or the 9th or whatever. It's probably going to be, can you find a bridge with somebody like Hall or Wells if it's the 6th and 7th for the bullpen?
So CJ, let's talk about the guys that have been doing it since they came back and are healthy. 7, 8, 9, the Rangers have gone with Josh Spores, then Aroldis Chapman, and then Jose Leclerc. Jose Leclerc was supposed to be the closer. Started the season just dreadful. I mean, I think his ERA was almost or over 7 in the beginning of the season bad. As the closer.
He had a bad spring too.
Yeah, he had a bad spring. So anyway, they wound up taking him out. He got hurt. He rehabbed. He came back, and he has been really, really good since he came back. Chapman, if you see Chapman on the second day, you guys are going to have a lot of fun, just to let you know.
Oh, is he one of these guys who's bad on back-to-back?
Chapman, they gave stats during the last series. He has a 2.02 ERA on his first day and a 7.79 ERA if he pitches back-to-back days.
Wow. He has more walks than innings pitched when he hit on that second day.
On the second day, yeah. So he is not if the Rangers get in a place where they have to bring him in, then you guys will have some of those 9th inning runs you were talking about because he is not good on the second.
Yeah. But the good thing that Leclerc has come back, and he was the guy Ben and I were thinking might get DFA'd at one point during the season. And he came back and he was hitting 98 miles an hour in the playoffs. I mean, and he's got a nasty slider, very nasty slider. He does make the hitter look silly slider. And coming off of the fastball that's now hitting 98, where he was hitting 94, 95. It's a big difference, and he's hitting it with low. He's hitting it location, low inside corner. The strikeout that he got to end the game the other day, and get us to the point where we are now was a low inside. I mean, just right where Jonah Heim called it. Yeah, low inside corner, 98 miles an hour, 3-2 count, and he's unflappable. He doesn't, like they said on the game, the broadcast said that he looked like he was taking a walk on the beach, while he's out there trying to close the game, because he's very calm. So that was a huge boost. Josh Spores has been the surprise for us this year. We knew he always had the stuff. The stuff was there. It's pretty electric, but he never was able to put a consistent.
He couldn't stay in the zone.
He couldn't stay in the zone. He would lose command. He'd have a good game or two and then just lose it for 5. But not, it was about midway through the season he really started to come on and put some consistent outings back together. And he earned his spot as being a guy that would come in tight situations and high leverage situations later on in the games. And so you'd look at him for sure being the 7th inning guy. So it looked a lot better than it has been all year long in the playoffs, where only, the Rays only had 1 hit off the bullpen in 2 games. So
one run.
I'm sorry.
No, you're right. 1 hit. I'm sorry. Off the bullpen.
1 hit,
no runs. Yeah. No, the run was off of Walton.
Oh, that was Uvalde. Yeah, that was Uvalde. Oh. So yeah, they did outstanding in the playoffs, and if we get that bullpen, the same bullpen that we got in Tampa Bay, it'll be tough on the Orioles. But if we revert back to what's the previous 162, we don't have a whole lot of confidence. Yeah,
the problem is the Rangers can't seem to hit and pitch at the same time.
Right.
Except for those 2 wild card games, because the Rangers, had scored the most runs of any team in baseball this year. They hit the most home runs of any team in baseball, but they also got shut out like 8 or 9 times this year, and then had games where they just, it looked like they had never played baseball before. They're out there just hacking at everything.
Poor John Gray. It seemed like every time he pitched, he never got runs.
Oh yeah, John Gray lost
2-1
back-to-back 1-0 games where he pitched complete games in both of them.
Complete games, 1 run allowed with the Texas offense, and got no help.
Yep. So that he's on the injured list, so you won't see him during this series. All right. So offensively, both these teams are really good. So let's go ahead and throw our predictions out there, guys. We'll start with you, Mark. Who do you think wins the series? How many games?
You know, I am congenitally unable to believe in the Orioles. I actually put on Camden Chat Rangers in 4. I'll tell you why. I did have a reason, and it's because the Orioles offense was pretty bad for the last 2 weeks. And so it didn't fill me with confidence that they're going to be able to come out and probably score the amount of runs they're going to need to be able to score. And so that was why I said that. But also that's because, as I joked on my own podcast, like my learned life experience in nearly 40 years of life as an Orioles fan is not full of positives. This is, I think, the 6th time in my life they've been in the postseason at all. Yeah. So it's just like, and again, going back to like, this was not the year they were supposed to start being good, So that was like another thing fans were wrestling with through the years. Like, this isn't even the major prospect heavy team that we were all imagining that would start being good maybe like next year. It's almost like they arrived a year earlier than expected. So I don't know what to make of all of these guys. A number of them had good years. Like the Orioles ended up having a pretty darn good outfield trio. Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins, Anthony Santander, basically all having career years. I wasn't sure that I didn't think like 2/3 of those guys were going to make the next great Orioles team. I thought it was going to be the prospects replacing them. And so like the Orioles won 101 games this year, right? But like, I've never been totally sure what to make of them. And now I'm sitting here like, okay, can they win in the postseason? I cannot click to my brain and say, yes, I see it happening. So yeah, Rangers in 4 was what I put on Camden Chat. We'll see if they exceed my expectations.
All right, CJ, what you got?
I knew you were going to have me go first.
I can go first if you want.
Really, it's so going to depend. I predict it will go 5 games one way or the other. And that if you get the Rangers that showed up to Tampa Bay, the Rangers will win the series. If you get more of what we saw, especially the last week of the season, then the Rangers are in trouble because Baltimore is a team that's from what we've seen over here, as far as looking at Baltimore, is they take advantage of opportunities given, especially extra outs, errors or walks, whatnot. And the Rangers, again, that bullpen just worries me. Anything prior to, if you're able to get to our starting pitchers and you get the pitcher out before the 6th inning, I worry a lot about that.
Yeah.
So I'll say Rangers in 5. But it's going to take them being what they were against Tampa Bay to beat a more complete, I think, because the Rays did have a lot of injuries. I think the Orioles are much healthier than the Rays were. So they're not – I just don't think and they're going to get enough chances that the Rays gave them to win. So I will take the Rangers in 5 because I believe they're going to take that momentum from the last series and push it forward.
Well, here's my thought. I think if it goes 5, I think the Rangers are in trouble because I think, again, if you look back at that Tampa series, Tampa helped them out. They had 5 errors in the second game that helped them out. They had 2 or 3 errors in the first game that helped the Rangers out. The Rangers scored a lot, but they still didn't look fantastic. So if they get in trouble, I have a feeling that offense is going to start swinging too much. So I think they have to get rid of it quick. I don't think they will. I think it's going to be a 5-game series as well, but I'm going to go Baltimore in 5 just because I think I'm like Mark. My history tells me that the Rangers aren't going to win this series. But, it's funny because both teams arrived a year early. The Rangers weren't supposed to be good till 2024. Both teams have a lot of young guys impacting, like the Rangers have Evan Carter, Josh Young, Jonah Heim, all the Nathaniel Lowe, all these guys making an impact.
They haven't played this long. Yeah.
One of these two teams is going to have a fall apart in order for the other one to win this series. Both teams are good. They match up really well. I think it's going to be a fantastic series to watch. I don't think any game will be a blowout. And like I said, if it comes down to the bullpen, I just feel like we're in trouble if the game comes down to the bullpen.
I really do.
So I've got Orioles in 5, and I had one favor to ask Mark. I told him off air. One favor is if the Orioles do win this series and Minnesota loses theirs, please knock the Houston Astros out of the playoffs.
Yes. We'll become Baltimore fans for sure. for that series.
Well, the Orioles split their 6 games against the Astros this year, so we'll see if I end up having to worry about that. But the Orioles also don't have a whole ton of postseason experience. In fact, the one guy that's the most veteran guy on the team is Kyle Gibson, who I don't even know if we're going to see pitch in the series. He was on the Phillies last year when they made their World Series run, and they basically like banished him during the postseason run. Like he didn't pitch. He didn't start any game, which of course he shouldn't have. He had an ERA over 5 in the regular season last year. So why would you want him to start? And he had a 4.73 ERA for the Orioles this year. So I also hope we don't see him
that's
start
a guy
a game
we're
in this
fond
series.
of. He was really good for us.
Yeah, if it goes 3, I feel like it's going to be maybe John Means, maybe Dean Kramer. And if it goes 4, the other one of those guys, and Gibson maybe in like emergency long relief or something. But their most experienced postseason player, I believe, on the roster in terms of games played is Aaron Hicks, who ended up arriving at the end of May after the Yankees got rid of him because he was old and slow and not hitting anymore. And he was revitalized a pretty good amount coming to the Orioles. It turned out maybe just needed a change of scenery. Finished with the season with the Orioles with a 381 on base percentage with the O's in 200 at bats.
Wow,
it's 236 plate appearances,
and
he looked really slow in the outfield in September. I hope we don't see him out there. Certainly not in any late innings, but. I mean, that was, you do want to talk about unexpected guys. That was another one. Like, no one could have known he was going to be on the Orioles at the start of the season. And they brought him in response to Cedric Mullins getting injured. And Mullins ended up missing about a month. And Hicks was good enough that they kept him around even after Mullins was back. He's kind of, although as a switch hitter, he's kind of been like a platoon guy, and he's been doing well. So again, I don't know. I cannot believe in the Orioles. I'll also tell you the last time I believed in the Orioles was the 2014 American League Championship Series when they were playing the Royals. And that was coming off of sweeping the Tigers when every game the Tigers pitched a Cy Young winner. The Orioles plowed right through them. It was, what was it? It was David Price, Max Scherzer, and was it Rick Porcello Porcello won one later? There might have been a third guy. I'm sorry to that guy. I'm forgetting. But so, it was like, okay, the Orioles just rolled over the Tigers. They're the team of destiny. And then no, the 2014 Royals did him in. So I just can't be like, yes, the Orioles are going to do it because it's just beyond my imagination. But I agree with you guys. This should be a really interesting series. I think there's some very good players and very interesting young players who are going to be making their mark on MLB over the next several years. That should be, for the first few months, I guess people were talking about kind of Gunnar Henderson and Josh Young kind of dueling it out for AL Rookie of the Year. I think Young's injury knocked him out of that consideration a bit, and Henderson kept doing really well. But, that's a pair of young guys that should be interesting for years. It's two teams that seem like this is not the best they're going to be in the next 2 to 3 years.
And, this isn't a Cinderella one-time show up,
It could be looking back in like 10 years or 15 years, like the rosters that are here. Like you could have some players that end up having some really good careers. Kind of like when I look back on the Orioles that were in the postseason in the 90s, like 1996, 1997. In 97, in the division series, they played the Mariners, and I think there was like 6 future Hall of Famers on those rosters. And that's not counting Alex Rodriguez, who's his own complicated case, who was, of course, at the very beginning of his career on the Mariners. And then Rafael Palmeiro, also a complicated case on the Orioles. But, that those were loaded rosters. You look at the 97 division series between the Orioles and Mariners. And I'm not saying there's going to be multiple Hall of Famers in this series, but I think, if we look at it 10 years down the road, it's going to be like, wow, there were some guys who had some really great careers that, cut their postseason teeth in this Orioles Rangers ALDS.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I have a strong feeling that this isn't the last time the Rangers and Orioles are going to meet in the playoffs in the next 5 or 6 years, because both teams, like you said, young nucleuses, both teams got some budding stars, and both teams they're a year early. So next year, we could see this exact same matchup again next year. We'll have to wait and see. But thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mark.
Thank you guys for having me. It's going to be an angst-ridden series for all of us, I think. And
I'm already nervous.
Good luck to the winner going forward in any case.
Totally agree. I'm rooting for whoever wins this series. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
All right, Mark Brown, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Ranger Report podcast. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and at therangerreport.com.